各位电脑前面的新老朋友，大家好。Good afternoon, Daniel, Sandy, and Dr. Joshua, and good friends. I'm going to use Chinese to introduce our organization. OK. 美国翰林文教基金会呢，我们是2012年经过美国政府核准立案的，在美国旧金山成立的501c3的组织。我们是一个以教育文化为内涵的非牟利组织。我们的成员包括了旧金山湾区在教育、文化、传播、社团等等不同领域极具盛名的资深专家们。翰林文教基金会我们的宗旨呢，是传承和弘扬中华文化，为两岸三地的老师、学生和美国的青少年和大学生建立交流互动的平台。我们的目的呢，是希望华裔下一代能够承担社会责任，增加公民意识，未来呢，能够担当美中民间文化交流小天使的使命。我们希望每个孩子都能够履行好美国好公民的责任。翰林文教基金会我们的核心价值是谦虚、尊重、包容、理解、合作、愉快的工作。我们的核心使命呢，就是以培养年轻的一代，让他们有文化的品味，具备社会竞争力，还有创新的精神，以社会责任感为己任。我们的项目包罗万象，我们有实体的寻根营，在2020年开始呢，因为是 COVID-19 的原因，我们改成了网上春夏秋冬4季的网上营。我们也有云知识跟云知识的讲座，那今天呢就是我们第24期的云知识的讲座。我们也有慈善跟紧急救助，我们有青年发展部，我们的成员的年龄呢是12岁到18岁。我们的青年孩子呢也在网络上呢教比较需要帮助的孩子呢，我们有 tutoring 的工作。我们也参与了许多的社区活动，比方说我们每个月的第2个礼拜天固定的去清扫张纯如的纪念公园。我们参加滑体会的运动大会，刚刚我们的青年部的孩子呢参加过游泳的 timer 的工作，昨天呢也去到一个农场的去采摘这个 almond， 然后也会参加艾滋海默症的这个健走等等。我们还有一个 program 的是 Youth Civic Leadership 的 program， 我们希望能够培养未来的青年领袖。我们还有一个呢是翰林教学研发中心，是我们翰林文教基金会的 DBA 的一个组织，我们专门研究开发新型的课程，比方说小美食家啦、最强大脑、北美记忆力等等。当然我们也非常欢迎大家的赞助。在我介绍完了翰林文教基金会之后呢，我想今天要跟大家分享一下，为什么翰林文教基金会呢，我们这次呢要办这个 Sel 的一个讲座，翻成中文叫做社会情感学习，英文呢就是 Social and Emotional Learning。 如果你仔细的看我们翰林的宗旨跟目标，其实我对于 Social and Emotional Learning 呢，我是非常的感兴趣。我觉得我们的孩子呢，我们的父母呢，包括我自己呢，我现在关心我的孩子跟我的孙子，我非常关心我们孩子的未来的，这都是我们应该最关心的事情。然后我们怎么希望我们的孩子们呢，都能够健康的成长。但是在这个健康成长的过程中间，我觉得如何让孩子管理他们的情绪，如何让他们设定他们的人生目标，如何让他们培养他们的自信，如何让他们能够处理问题，如何让他们能够对外沟通，如何让我们的孩子能够发现对他们有影响的人跟事，如何让他们能够参与社区的工作。在很巧缘的机会里头呢，我一个好朋友 Peter Ho 呢，让我介绍了 Fax 这一家公司。他的老板呢是 Daniel 呢让我非常的 impress 呢，他的宗旨跟目标是我们非常喜欢的事情，但是呢他把它付诸行动。我想在这儿呢介绍一下Daniel Byun 啊，他是这个Fax 的这个 Senior President Consultant， 他呢是这个 Flex 的 Founder， 也是 CEO。 他呢是专门帮助孩子呢，就是能够上到顶尖的大学。然后呢，他自己的职业生涯呢，曾经呢做过这个 PricewaterhouseCoopers 的这个consulting 的工作，而且他也是有个人的一个呢，就是精品人力资源咨询的这么一个公司。后来他决定呢，要出来呢，让孩子们在小的时候呢就能够准备好，然后能够上更好的大学，更好的人生。虽然我觉得上好的大学也许不是我们翰林文教基金会唯一要给我们孩子们的，但是在他的这个领域中间呢，除了帮助孩子们能够上好的大学，当然上好的大学对于一个成功的人生可能是更前进一步，但是我真正感兴趣的呢是 social and emotional learning。 我觉得今天来到我们现场的朋友，当你了解了 social and emotional learning 之后，我相信对父母对孩子们今天都是迈向成功的第一步。我想我不耽误大家太多的时间，接下来呢，我们要请 Flex 的这个 Sandy 呢，隆重的介绍出他们的公司。我们现在请大家以我们的掌声来欢迎 Sandy， 还有今天我们的 Speaker Danny， 还有 Joshua， 掌声欢迎。
谢谢 Betty， 容我把这个 slide 给分享出来，大家能看到吗？
看得到。
好的 ，OK， 那因为要介绍公司呢，这一块我就会用英文来进行。Thank you so much, Betty, for inviting us to co-host this event. We're very excited to be here. My name's Cindy. I am the enrollment manager here at Flex. So a little bit about Flex. Flex was founded actually in 2001. For the last 2 decades, we've been a national leader in educational consulting, helping thousands of students and families navigate through their college prep and admission process. By bringing together industry-leading consultants, instructors, and admissions insiders, Flex provides middle to high schoolers with expertise, guidance, strategic recommendations, and personalized support to help them find their college fit and achieve their college dreams. As we continue our work to support our community and families on this journey, we thought it's very important to share this message that we're going to be sharing today. Since 2020, we've been seeing major shifts and new developments in college admissions. As we're adapting and learning to deal with these changes, Flex feels called to take the lead to not only stay on top of these new trends so we can provide excellent service to our existing families, but also to educate our community on what the changes mean to us at a macro level and how we can come up with effective strategies to better adapt and to continue to create positive impact. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Danny Byun, the founder and CEO of Flex, and Dr. Joshua Arnold to share some important messages with our community today. So without further ado, I would like to hand it back to Danny to get us started. I'll stop sharing. Danny, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cindy, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny Byun, and I'm the CEO and founder of Flex College Prep. It's very nice to be with everybody on this warm Sunday afternoon, and we thank you very much for taking time out of your afternoon to spend with us. I'm going to be sharing my screen now, and so let me just make sure I know how to do this. Share sound. And as I get us started, I would like to actually start by thanking Hanlin Education Foundation of America for creating this opportunity for us to be able to share some very important updates and information with the families here today. I'd especially like to recognize Miss Betty Ewan, who's the founder and executive director of Hanlin. As many of you know, Betty has been working and serving our communities in the Bay Area for many decades. She's made an incredible impact on those communities, and she is truly an inspiration to me. And you know, we're very excited to be able to partner with Betty and Hanlin today to bring this information to you. As Flex has been in the Bay Area for over the last 20 years, in the Fremont area, we've also established other friends and supporters. Some of them that you'll see here on the screen. Some of you may be familiar with Mr. Henry Yin, who's the national chairman of APAPA, which is a nonprofit organization supporting Asian and Pacific Islander community groups in California and nationally. Another friend of Flex is Dr. Yang Xiao, who's currently a Fremont City Council member and former school board member. And again, over the last 20 years, we've had the good fortune of meeting people like Hanlin and Miss Betty Yuen, Mr. Henry Yin, and Dr. Yang Xiao, just in the Fremont area. And just to provide a little bit more introduction to who Flex is, here you will see Flex's vision, mission, and values. The vision of Flex is to take students from being learners to impactors, people who are impacting the people and communities around them. And we want to do this by engaging with students as they pursue a life pathway. And we do this in 4 ways: by building academic foundations, creating meaningful opportunities, offering expert guidance, and expanding worldview. And our values are personal investment, collaboration, adaptability, and excellence. Obviously, when parents and families are entrusting their children and their children's future to a service provider, you want to make sure that that service provider has the best intentions for your children. This vision, mission, and value slide here, this basically states why Flex exists as an organization. And so with that in mind, I will jump into our presentation. But at different points along the way, you'll see the QR code. That's if I'm not mistaken, Cindy, I believe that's a WeChat QR code. And so if you want to learn more about Flex or the programs or the information that we're sharing with you today, you can scan that QR code and you can be taken directly to our website, where you can also see more about all the topics we'll be talking about today. So here is the agenda for today's webinar. First, I'll be providing the families some information about the changes and trends in college admission. Then I'm going to be introducing this topic of SEL and explaining how SEL has replaced the SAT in college admission. Then I'll invite Dr. Joshua Arnold to introduce the Flex Impactor Pathway. And then at the end, Cindy Wei will host a time of Q&A. So if you have any questions, maybe if you can write them down as we're going through the presentation, and then we'll do all of the questions at the end, and that will help our time to go more quickly. Changes and trends in college admission. So I know that in Fremont and in the Bay Area as a whole, our families are very knowledgeable about what is happening in the college admission process. And the parent information network is very powerful. So anytime there's a change in college admission or a new trend, many of our families immediately know. And so this is a slide that shows something that I'm sure most of our guests today already know. What is that? The UCs have eliminated the SAT and ACT requirement. What that means is the UCs will never require the SAT, ACT, or any kind of test for students who are applying to the UC system. And every time I say that, every time I make that statement, parents look at me and they say, are you sure? Did that really happen? And obviously, the SAT is one of the most important criteria in college admission for over 50 years. And therefore, I understand why it's difficult to, really understand this, but it's true. An Alameda County Superior Court judge actually said it is illegal for the UCs to even look at a student's SAT or ACT score, even if they submit it with part of their application. And so not only has the UC system eliminated the requirement, but a California Superior Court actually said the UCs are breaking the law if they look at the ACT or SAT score. And as many of you may also be aware, Harvard has said that for 5 years, they will not require the SAT either. And so here, it's not just the UCs, but many colleges across America right now are not requiring the SAT. So what does that mean for UC admission? So I'm going to start with UC admission, and then I'll talk a little bit more about private college admission as well. So what we have here is, if you look in the top left-hand corner, you see this is the old UC admission formula. Old, not current, but old. And because we are on a recording, I will say that many times. This is the old UC admission formula. The old UC admission formula, if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, the old UC admission formula was 10,000 points. Out of 10,000 points, if you look in the top right-hand corner, GPA was 4,500 points. Test scores, meaning SAT plus SAT subject tests, were 3,200 points. There were a few other academic criteria, and the total academic points was 8,800 out of 10,000. And what that means is the old UC admission formula was 88% academic. For the non-academic factors, leadership had a maximum point value of 300. Community service, 300. Activities related to your major, 300. Personal achievement, 300. So the total non-academic score was 1,200, or 12%. So just to illustrate how unbalanced this admission review was in the past, for leadership maximum 300 points, what does that mean? That means if my child is the high school class president in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, and is the captain of the football, basketball, and baseball team, and is the president and founder of the 10 largest clubs at my school, then under the old UC admission formula, that was total maximum combined 300 points. And so obviously, as we look at this admission formula, it was very focused on the academics. And that's why we as Silicon Valley Bay Area families, we know that in the past, for many, many years, we always say, if you want to go to the UCs, then you should get a good GPA and a good SAT score, and you can get into the good UCs. And that was true. But we also knew, but the private colleges, they want the academics plus activities. And that was also true. But now that the SAT has been eliminated from the process, this slide shows a sample of what the new UC admission process could look like. Now, I want to start by pointing your attention to the bottom left-hand corner where it says, note, the UCs no longer have an admission formula. And that is true. The UCs have now adopted a new holistic review process. But now, as 2 years ago in 2020, the UCs eliminated the test score, the question is, what will be the focus of this 3,200 points? Because again, this 3,200 points, that's 32% of the admission review. 32% of the process has been eliminated, and now they need to begin focusing on other parts of the admission review. And the basic expectation is that the UCs will reassign those points under the academic process into the non-academic process. But as they do that, and again, there's no UC admission formula, but I think you understand the basic idea. If the UCs were to reassign those 3,200 points into the non-academic, then the new UC admission process could be almost 50% academic and 50% non-academic, becoming more and more like the private admission process. And so, but again, the UCs have no admission formula, but this slide is designed just to give an idea as to the direction that the UC holistic review is moving. Some other colleges who currently do not require the SAT, first of all of the Ivy League colleges, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, UPenn, Cornell, Brown, and Dartmouth. None of the Ivy League colleges currently require the SAT. Stanford currently does not require the SAT. Johns Hopkins, Caltech, Duke, University of Chicago, Northwestern, USC, and many more colleges. None of these colleges require the SAT. But many of these colleges may bring the SAT requirement back in the future. But again, Harvard has already said, for the next 5 years, we will not require the SAT. And because Harvard is the leader in American college university admission, we expect many colleges will follow as Harvard does. But again, the question becomes, then what will colleges focus on now? Because this will impact how we as parents are supporting and guiding our children. And the answer to that question is SEL has replaced the SAT in college admission. So what is SEL? So first of all, I'll start by explaining that during the pandemic, as many of you know, the federal US government had 3 large stimulus bills where, because of COVID and the shutdowns, they knew there was going to be a big effect on many areas of our lives. So they had 3 large stimulus bills. I think the most famous or well-known part of those stimulus is the PPP, where companies were given funding so that they can continue to pay their employees during the shutdown. But what many people are not aware of is the federal government, during those 3 stimulus bills, actually printed, or they made available over $200 billion of funding to support students in kinder through 12th grade through the Learning Loss Mitigation Fund. The state of California received over $5 billion, over $5 billion with a B, to support students' learning loss and their social emotional learning or their social emotional health. So the California Department of Education received over $5 billion to prepare SEL, or social emotional standards, and implement those things into the public K-12 public schools all across California. And it's important to understand that when the government passes legislation, or when the government passes a law, and then they provide the funding, they do not do that so that their programs can fail. They do that so that their programs will succeed and they will be implemented. And what many families are not aware is that these standards have already been developed and they are already being implemented into our public schools. And if you go to the California Department of Education website, you can actually learn more about these funding sources. But if you go to the California Department of Education website, what you will also see is that the California Department of Education has already set the standards, and they have defined what does it mean for a student to be successful in their social and emotional development. So starting with early elementary school to late elementary school to middle school and high school, and even for adults, the California Department of Education has defined what does a successful student look like. In the same way they develop standards for math and for English and for science and every other subject, the California Department of Education has already defined what success looks like for social and emotional health and well-being. So what exactly is SEL? That's the question that I know many people are asking right now. And so I'm going to provide the California Department of Education definition for SEL. The California Department of Education has identified 5 key areas where students will be evaluated for their social and emotional development. And those 5 are listed here. The first one is self-awareness. How well do you know yourself? How well do you know your strengths and your weaknesses? How well do you know your heritage and your origin story? How well do you understand who you are and how you came to be that person that you are? Self-awareness. Because before we can do anything, before we can make any good decisions, before we can make any kind of meaningful impact in our communities, we must first know ourselves, self-awareness. The second one is self-management. Even if you know yourself, do you have goals that you've set? And even if you have goals, are you organized? Do you have a plan? Because the California Department of Education is saying it's very important for students to have goals and to have a plan to achieve those goals and to be disciplined and to be able to manage themselves to achieve those goals. So the second factor is self-management. So you can see that the first 2 have to do with ourselves. Number 3 and number 4 have to do with the social environment around us and other people. So number 3 is social awareness. How aware are you of how other people view you? And how aware are you of the diversity, all of the different people who are surrounding you? And based upon who they are and their background, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And based on that diversity in our community or in our schools, what are some different opportunities for me to make a positive impact in this environment? This is social awareness, being aware of my surrounding environments, and my community. Number 4 is relationship skills. Now that I understand the environment that I'm in, now that I understand who the other people are and who I am, now relationship skills has to do with working in teams. Now, how can I be a part of a team, and what will be my role? Will I be the leader, or will I be the supporter? Or maybe I'm the supporter now when I'm in 10th grade, but when I'm in 11th grade or 12th grade, I can become the leader. So relationship skills has to do with, developing these relationships to work together in teams. And the last one, the 5th one, is responsible decision making. Even if I'm working in a team, even if my team understands the community that we're in, even if we see the opportunities to make a meaningful and positive impact, it doesn't matter unless we act. And therefore, responsible decision-making has to do with this team of people working together to making a positive impact in our community. In the same way that Hanlin Education Foundation and Miss Betty Ewan have been doing for many, many years, even offering and promoting this seminar today to provide information to our communities. All of these are different ways of making a positive impact. And so the California Department of Education has defined these 5 areas as SEL. And these are the things that students are now being graded on in school. And if they do not exhibit, if they are not showing good development in these 5 areas, it can and will affect students' transcripts and report cards. And that's very important for us as parents to understand, because many times we think, oh, if our kids just get good grades in school. And I'm also a father. I have 4 children myself. And so I understand, how the parents are thinking. At least if nothing else, I hope my kids just get good grades in school. And if they do some activities, that's nice. And if they have good social emotional development, that's nice, but they have to get good grades. But now the California Department of Education is saying your social and emotional skills will impact your report card. And if you go to the California Department of Education website, you will see what does good SEL look like. And so that's very important for us as parents to understand. And so as the California Department of Education starts building SEL into the school curriculum, now the colleges have a way to start evaluating student SEL. And the beginning of this section of the seminar, I said, SEL has replaced the SAT in college admission. And so now we're going to look at how the colleges are evaluating SEL. And again, I'm going to start with Harvard, because I think everybody on this call, no matter where you're from, we all know the name Harvard, because Harvard is the top university in America. I shouldn't say top, but it's the oldest university in America. And it is definitely one of the leaders that is driving and shaping the way that American universities think. Here you see in 2016, Harvard published a report called Turning the Tide. And 200 colleges and universities in America, they adopted Harvard's report. And what that means is 200 colleges and universities, including all of the Ivies, including Stanford, including USC, including NYU, these colleges actually changed their admission review process based on this report. And in this report, this is basically what Harvard said. Harvard said that colleges and students in the application process, we must focus less on personal achievement. And that means less on how many APs did I take, less on did I win the Olympiad, focus less on am I the top tennis player in my high school or in my league. So focus less on personal achievement and focus more on meaningful, ethical, social engagement. So beginning 6 or 7 years ago, Harvard is already starting to give us some language about how the colleges will evaluate and define SEL. Here we have meaningful, ethical, social engagement. Then in 2020, during the pandemic, there were many students who were worried because, we all know that basically everything closed down on March 13th, 2020. That's Friday the 13th in 2020. And for students who are in high school and families who are in high school, suddenly my junior year is going to close down. What am I going to do about my AP tests? And what about my summer activities? And, so students and families became very worried. And Harvard and the colleges, they understood this. And so Harvard published another report called Caring Counts in Crisis. This time, over 300 colleges and universities adopted this report. And Harvard basically doubled down saying colleges and students must prioritize impact over achievement. Now, if you remember what was happening back in 2020, obviously there was COVID and the pandemic and the shutdown, and many people, their health was being affected. But during 2020, we also had the BLM, Black Lives Matters movement. We also had the Asian hate problem. And we also had Trump v. Biden. So during 2020, there were so many things happening, and they were really, really important issues that were being discussed. And what the colleges were basically saying is this: during this time, during this important time in American history, don't worry about your piano recital, and don't worry about improving your golf score, okay? This is not the time to focus on personal achievement. During this time, the colleges want students who are focusing on how they can impact the people and the communities around them. If one of these issues that is being discussed, if one of those things is important to you, if you're passionate about those things, then start getting involved in more meaningful, ethical, social engagement. Start thinking more about how you can impact the people and the communities around you. Don't worry about your personal achievement. So again, we're starting to hear more of the language about how the colleges are defining SEL. To gather more language, there's an organization called the Character Collaborative, and you see their website here, www.character-admission.org. And the Character Collaborative is a group of colleges and universities coming together to basically echo what Harvard has been saying. Rather than focusing on personal achievement, colleges need to focus on students' SEL or student character in the college admission process. some of those character traits, some of the more popular or common ones that many colleges and universities, including Harvard, that they're looking for are things like resilience. They're looking for students who have toughness and grit, service to others or community service. They're looking for students who have curiosity, a strong desire to learn, not just studying for good grades, but students who are studying because they want to learn. Perseverance, overcoming difficulties or challenges. Respect for others and kindness. Integrity or moral uprightness. So from Harvard, from the Character Collaborative, to the UC admission review process, colleges and universities all across America, we see that the SAT is getting smaller and SEL is getting bigger and bigger in the college application process. And so it's very important, again, for us as parents to understand these things, because when I look at this list of characteristics that the Character Collaborative is talking about, toughness, having the impacted mind or community service mind, or curiosity. These are not things that students can develop in 10th grade just for college, right? These are characteristics, these are qualities that take many, many years for students to develop. And so it's important for us as parents to really focus on these things as we raise our children. But as a parent, I know it's not easy. And Dr. Joshua Arnold and I, we sit next to each other in the office every day. And Dr. Arnold also has 2 children. So we have 6 children between us, all similar age. And we always talk about, even for us as parents, and we're in the education industry, we know how important it is, but it's really not easy to do. We have to be very intentional and purposeful in the way that we develop these characteristics within our kids. And that always leaves parents asking the question, so how can we help our children today? How can parents help their children? Because we have many parents and families on this call, and we're on this call on a Sunday afternoon because our children's development and their future, it's so important to us as parents. So how can parents help their children? This is where Flex, over the last 2 years, has developed the Impactor Pathway. What is the Impactor Pathway? It is social and emotional SEL courses and training for 6th to 9th grade students. And many families ask us, why can't students in 10th or 11th grade do this? And the honest truth is, all students need it. Even me as an adult, I need to continue growing in my SEL, in my social and emotional skills. But the reality is, students who are in 10th grade and 11th grade, if you have children those ages, you know how busy our students are at that age. And so it's not easy for students to fit these kind of things into their schedules. And so our recommendation right now is really for families who have students in 6th through 9th grades to really aggressively begin focusing on SEL and developing those skills and those competencies. And I'd like to just take a minute to introduce our curriculum leadership team. Dr. Joshua Arnold, who I will hand it over to here in just a minute. Dr. Arnold is actually the former superintendent of the Culver City Unified School District. So he was a public school district superintendent. And he also was the superintendent for the Catch Prep family of charter schools. And Dr. Arnold has over 20 years of experience in K-12 leadership as a principal, as an assistant superintendent, and most recently as a superintendent. And he has his master's in education from Harvard, and he received his doctorate in education from USC. Next, Mr. Jim Burke, who was an English teacher for over 30 years at Burlingame High School. And Mr. Burke was actually a curriculum developer for the College Board for over 16 years. And as many of you know, the College Board is the maker of the SAT and the AP tests. Most importantly, Mr. Burke published over 20 books on topics like the teacher's companion, what's the big idea, the reader's companion, and more. And the theme of all these books is how teachers can support students to be successful in the classroom, and how students can support themselves to being successful as well. So all of Mr. Burke's teaching and writing has to do with student success in the classroom. And last but not least, Miss Ashley Michelson. She graduated from USC, and she was the valedictorian of USC. Then she received a master's in education, and she was a teacher and curriculum developer for nearly 10 years, most recently with the PUC Early Academy for Leaders and Scholars, where she was the curriculum head. So this school was really focused on leadership and scholarship, and she was the curriculum lead at PUC. And so this is the leadership team that has developed the Flex Impactor pathway based upon the California Department of Education standards. So what is the Flex Impactor pathway? The Flex Impactor pathway is a 6-course program. So there are 6 courses. The first one, and they're all aligned to the California Department of Education standards. So the first California Department of Education standard, if you remember, is self-awareness, knowing thyself. And the first class, or the first course in the Impactor pathway, is University of You, know thyself. The second course, goal setting and habits that stick, and that matches with self-management. The third course is finding your role to make teams work. That's social awareness. The fourth one, everyone's an influencer, leadership for change. That's relationship skills. The fifth course is strategies for problem solving, responsible decision making. And all of these classes are focusing on how students can become, in a meaningful, ethical way, become socially involved and become impact-minded. And so the sixth course is called From Big Ideas to Big Impact, where we're explaining and we're teaching students what is impact, why it's important, and how each individual can make an impact. After completing these 6 courses, students have the opportunity to participate in the Flex Impactor Incubator, which is basically a community service project. So we will help each student identify a passion project or find a cause that is important to them. And then we will show them and work with them to apply all the skills they've developed from the 6 courses in this community service project, where the students can, start showing and demonstrating leadership and impact. And as students do these things, they can earn community service hours and start building their resume for the college application process. But even more important than the college application process, as parents, all of us want our children to be good people, and we want them to make a positive impact on the people around us. And so this impactor pathway is really designed to support students to be successful in high school, college, and beyond into their careers. And from the Flex Impactor pathway, we actually already have years and years of success stories. The first one that you see here on the left is Curious.org. This is a nonprofit organization that was started by two former Flex students, Rachel Lai and Alexander Akra. And they basically created an online STEM, science and engineering type of education program for elementary age students. And so they have these online seminars and webinars and instructional videos, and they lead different types of experiments. And then once in a while, they have in-person workshops, as you can see in the picture there. And they've supported thousands and thousands of students since they were started. And even though the founders have graduated and gone to college and they're, moving on from high school, other students continue the work because it's such a good work. Shooting Stars Foundation was actually started by a student from Irvington High School. And this student basically created a nonprofit organization that provides tutoring to students in underprivileged communities. And so from Curious, the two founders, they went to college at Princeton and Stanford. The founder of Shooting Stars Foundation went to college at UPenn Wharton, the business college. And so you can see that as students are showing good SEL, it's also turning into good college results, but it's also making a positive impact on their communities, and it's helping them to become better citizens in their communities as well. But probably the most famous success story from the Flex Impactor Incubator is William Kim, and you see his picture on the right-hand side. I know everybody sees President Obama on the left side, but if you look on the right side, you see Will Kim. Will Kim graduated from Mission San Jose High School in Fremont, and he started a nonprofit organization to support students. And President Obama actually talks about this. And Will graduated from Stanford. And last year, he was actually recognized by Forbes as the top 30 under 30 years old. And I'd like for you to hear what President Obama has to say about Will Kim.
Nothing inspires me more than knowing that young people all across the country are already making their marks. They're not waiting. They're making a difference now. There are students like Will Kim from Fremont, California, who launched a nonprofit that gives loans to students from low-income schools who want to start their own business. Think about that. So he's giving loans to other students. He set up a non-for-profit. He's raising the money doing what he loves through dodgeball tournaments and capture the flag games. But he's creative, he took initiative, and now he's helping other young people be able to afford the schooling that they need.
And so here, President Obama, again, is using more language. He's creative, he's taking initiative, he's helping. And these are the characteristics, not just colleges, but we as people within our society, those are the kind of characteristics that we want of our own children. Those are the kind of people that we want to be around. And this is how SEL is becoming more and more important in the college admission process, but really requisite for success in high school, college, and beyond. And the Flex Impactor pathway is basically, it's a totally different type of a platform. where students have an interactive experience. And for this part of the presentation, I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Joshua Arnold. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Dr. Arnold, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Danny. Really appreciate all the information that you shared, and just want to say xie to Betty and to the Hanlin group and community for allowing Flex, Danny, myself, and Cindy to be able to present this critical information to you regarding what it is that colleges are actually doing, saying, and looking for from students going forward over the next 10, 20 years as they graduate from high school and head over to college. For those of you, if you haven't had a chance to do this already, all of the information that Danny has shared is available on impactorpathway.com. And I'm going to be highlighting some of the ways that the Impactor Pathway and Flex actually work to strive to build up those student competencies in SEL, more than just reading an article or learning about what self-awareness or social awareness is. Our platform is able, through cutting-edge technology, to be able to work with students and provide them feedback on their behaviors. And I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. Coaching and feedback on the actions and behaviors of students so that they learn how to actually demonstrate empathy and other core SEL competencies. To help demonstrate this, I'd like to take everybody through our quick parent diagnostic. I'll be fast forwarding for the sake of time through some of these, but just want to make sure that you get a gist of how Flex actually works to build these competencies and change some of these behaviors. And so this is an assessment. It's a quiz, so to speak, and we'd love for you to participate. And so if you don't mind, and I'll take just about a minute to allow for people to kind of do this and follow along, we'd love it if you could text the word Flex from your phone, if it's available, to the number 1-877-324-4729. Again, if you text the word Flex to the phone number 877-324-4729, you'll be able to take this assessment along with us. We'll ask you for your name, your email, so that we can email you some results. And then the questions will come throughout the presentation, and you can feel free to text in your answer to what we think are some very captivating, insightful, and enlightening questions regarding adult SEL and also the transformational SEL that we'll be talking about and working to build in your 6th through 9th grader. Again, Flex is the word that you would text to 877-324-4729. And so I'll let this assessment begin. And you'll see right away that we're greeted by one of the Flex staff members, Grace. I'll play a little bit of what she's talking about here. And I'll come right back. Great.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to complete this diagnostic assessment for parents. I'm Grace, one of the advisors here at Flex College Prep. And like you, we at Flex have noticed that as the 21st century world becomes more technologically connected and globalized, skills like goal setting, adaptability, and interpersonal communication have become requisite for success.
And Grace goes on to continue to talk about exactly what Danny talked about here in this program, and the fact that the reality is that the college landscape has changed. And so what we've done at Flex is develop this parent assessment to demonstrate the ways that we'll be engaging with students, not just through a course and curriculum, but again, through coaching and feedback of experts in SEL that provide the kind of insights needed to improve social emotional competencies and learning. And I'd love for you to hear from Joe, somebody that we commissioned from Stanford and Yale, an admission advisor, to hear what he's asking parents about their knowledge of SEL.
Hi there, parents and family members. I'm Joe Garolas, a career university admissions director who spent time at colleges including Stanford and Yale. And over the course of this diagnostic, I'll try to clear up some of the confusion around the skills that are replacing the SAT and standardized test scores.
So Joe goes on to kind of speak exactly to what Danny had been talking about throughout the presentation, the fact and reality that the SAT is gone and that SEL skills have replaced it. As we get to the end of what Joe's talking about, he asks this question. And for those of you that texted in Flex, the phone number, we'd ask you to answer the following question on your phones if you'd like.
Create learning experiences that set your student up for success. If this sounds like a plan, let's get started with our first question. Of the college readiness competencies listed below, which ones do you feel you've developed the most? Feel free to click as many choices that apply to you.
So one of the things you might notice right away, as well as answering the question, which is which of these soft skills or these competencies relate to you: collaboration, time management, active listening, or communication. One of the things we'd also like to highlight is our cutting edge technology. So we've developed the ability to overlay questions on top of videos so that students are not simply being passive and watching a demonstration of a particular skill or behavior, but they're engaging in the middle of the moment. And throughout our video and core series, we have the ability to allow students to click responses and then also to track that data and share that data and responses back to you, the parent. And so if you've already gone ahead and texted in your answer, I'll go ahead and choose collaboration and see what Joe has to say next. As we continue through the assessment, it's going to assess the exact same SEL skills that Danny talked about earlier that have all been sanctioned and approved by the state of California and that are now being taught and implemented in your child's schools throughout the state. Those skills are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And so to demonstrate that specifically, we'd like to ask all of you a question that you might not think has a lot to do with getting into college, but we think are the exact kinds of skills that students like Will, who President Barack Obama shouted out just a few years ago, were able to demonstrate and relay through their college application. And here's the question. For our first exercise, we'd love it if you can choose a seat. So I'd like for you to kind of look at the image that you see on your right. And I want you to imagine that this is a classroom and that you are the first student walking into this classroom and you have the ability to self-select your seat. So the teacher isn't going to assign you a seat. It's an environment similar to any environment in college where you can choose to sit wherever you'd like. You can see that the door is situated here when you walk in. The smart board is here near seats 9 and 13. And the question is, where would you like to sit? If you could choose anywhere, where would you choose to sit? A very seemingly benign, simple, and what seems like an inconsequential question. For those of you playing along on your phones, feel free to go ahead and text in your answer response. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and choose an answer on our behalf. And by the way, all of you can do this quiz for yourself at impactyourpathway.com. I'm going to go ahead and choose seat number 35. And the reason I want to choose seat 35 is because I get worried about emergencies. And so I want to sit near the door in the case of an earthquake or in the case of I get a text message from my daughter or from my mom and I need to answer it and step outside and take a call. So I want to be as least disruptive as possible in those moments. So I'm going to choose to sit at seat 35. Again, it's going to ask me why I chose to sit here. And I'm going to put because I like to be by the door in the case of an emergency. It seems like a pretty rational answer, something that any adult or any student might feel. You can also imagine that a student might say they like to sit in seat 7 because they're a little bit shy and maybe kind of don't want to be so directly close to the professor. Or maybe somebody says they want to sit in seat 9 because they wear glasses and it's hard for them to see from far away. But we're going to go ahead and take this quiz choosing seat 35. And here's where the bread meets the butter. Did you know that your selection of seat 35, which is not in the upside down T green zone, is scientifically proven? I'm going to say that again. Scientifically proven to result in a lower chance of passing the class, up to 23% lower in large lecture halls. This, ladies and gentlemen, this parents, this is SEL. SEL are the small decisions and behaviors we make about ourselves throughout the learning day, throughout our school day, that end up impacting our academic performance, our achievement, our ability to collaborate, our ability to lead. It's small decisions like where you sit in class. And to provide the research, we've gone ahead and cited the actual research by which this occurs. This is not an opinion. This is a scientifically proven fact that a preference for sitting in the back, and this is really key, regardless of whether you do so, increases the probability of receiving a D or F by 23 percentage points. The key to this entire sentence and this entire fact is regardless of whether you do so. It doesn't matter if you actually choose to sit in the front. It's about if you truly inside your heart prefer to sit in the back. If that's your value, if that's your preference, you will result in up to a 23% lower chance of passing a class. And so now that you have this knowledge, or your child has this knowledge, would you consider changing your behavior? In general, we think the answer is yes, but keep in mind, it's not easy to change a behavior. So just because we want to doesn't mean necessarily that a child will. And then finally, we'll ask you this question. Do you know where your child sits? I want you to think about that question. Not do you know where you hope your child sits? Not do you know where your child tells you that they sit? But do you know when your sixth grader, when your ninth grader, when your 12th grader, or your college student is left to choose by themselves, do you truly know where they sit? And do you know where they want to sit and prefer to sit and why they want and prefer to sit there? This is SEL. It's this knowledge, this understanding, this thinking about one's self-awareness and thinking about the communication our behaviors say to others. And it's this Impactor Pathway course series in which students not only learn these facts and figures, but also learn how to modify their behaviors and also include and incorporate some of these values. Our next one is really, really interesting. And for those of you following along, really encourage you to pay attention. Picking a seat's easy enough, but Joe's going to talk to us about a really, really hard thing, introducing oneself. Let's check him out.
Now that you've told me your name, completed part of the assessment, and gotten to know a little more about me, I'd like to learn about you. In this part of the diagnostic, we're focused on introduction and the communication and social awareness that comes with telling others who you are.
So what Joe's going to ask, and this is real, and this is what our technology allows for, Joe is going to ask you, the parent, or inside of our course series, the student, to actually practice introducing themselves. And not practice on their own, but actually practice through recording a video. These videos, by the way, parents will have access to, and you can see your students' progress as they work on their introduction skills, their presentation skills, their confidence building, and those skills throughout. Let's see how Joe frames it.
As others do, especially during a high-stakes moment like an interview introduction. Of course, you should feel free to skip responding to this question if you prefer. But remember, your student won't have that luxury. Are you ready? Here we go. So, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So one of the things that we allow parents to do is skip this question in the assessment, but Joe also says your child won't be able to skip this moment. And so through our technology, exactly what you see on the screen will happen for your student. And so you'll be able to actually record a video just like this, upload it. Your student will work on that feedback and behavior, submit it before coming to one of our coaching classes with live in-person feedback from an SEL coach. And you, the parent, will have access to how your student is performing over the course of their SEL development. This is the kind of cutting edge technology that we think is really important and leverages the skills requisite, as Danny said, that now that the SAT is gone, what's being replaced with it? SEL, and the ability for students to actually look someone confidently in the eye in an interview and say, hi, my name is Josh, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. That simple skill is a lot harder, right, than we imagine. And so finally, to demonstrate this, we wanted to kind of take a piece of that college interview process and show you what it really looks like. And so in this question, we're going to ask you, the parents, again, for those of you following along, we're going to ask you a kind of creative question maybe something that you've heard, one of those kind of Google or Twitter interview questions when you go to work at a big tech company, a question that doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, but engages the interviewer in a really interesting way. And here it is. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? I want you to think about what you would really do if you got that question in an interview. How would you answer it? There's no way you could have prepared for it. It's such a creative, off-the-cuff question. It might actually scare an 11th or 12th grader applying to college. It's so unique and distinct. Let's hear Joe frame it, and then we'll show you an example of the SEL competencies all put together on how a student can actually answer this question.
Now, this next exercise is one of my favorites. A friend of mine from Stanford sent me an interview snippet from the last admissions cycle in which the interviewer asked, which would you rather fight, one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? Many parents wonder why colleges would ask such a question. What do horses and ducks have to do with college admission? Of course, the answer here isn't all that important. The question is simply a mechanism colleges use to assess the way a student handles something that isn't expected. Will they take the question literally? Will they smile at the whimsical nature of the query? Again, it's not the content of the response that's important. It's the way a student communicates with their eyes, body language, and comfortability in the moment. Okay, lock in your duck-sized answer on this page before clicking through, and I'll show you a horse-sized student response on the other side. By the way, have you ever experienced these kinds of creative, open-ended questions in interviews yourself?
So again, really interesting, fun question. We'll show you a response on the other side, but for those of you texting along, what is your answer to this question? Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? I think for these purposes, we'll just go ahead and click the first one horse-sized duck, and we'll get taken to this student response from Anna. Let's go ahead and take a listen to her.
The duck that's the size of a horse, the horse-sized duck.
The horse-sized duck, yeah.
I honestly think if it were like a dozen duck-sized horses, yeah, I would go with that. But 100, that's a lot of pieces for my attention to be split up into. I have learned in psych this past year that multitasking is a myth because you can only actually focus on one thing at a time. And having to focus on 100 different animals who are out to get me, that's just too much of a strain on my mental capacity. So I really don't think, I think it's more realistic to have one larger problem to focus on and address, rather than splitting my consciousness into a million different pieces. So,
I mean, we love this answer, and we love how this student actually responded to a question that they could not have been prepared for and demonstrated the kind of SEL, the kind of calmness, the kind of self-awareness, the kind of relationship building through this process with Stanford to be able to calmly not only answer the question, but to provide an answer that demonstrates her confidence and her ability as a learner. We have great news to share with you about Anna. She literally got in. We've gotten a lot of feedback about that process, and we're really happy to be able to share with you that video. But she got accepted to Stanford as part of the Behavioral Economics and Entrepreneurship program, one of the most rigorous and cutting-edge programs in all of Stanford University. And so her grades and activities list were no different from her peers, but her ability to smile, laugh, communicate thoughtfully, and be humble are truly unparalleled, as anyone else can see. And so it's these kinds of skills and competencies that we work through this technology, this coursework, online and in-person settings to really demonstrate what Danny had been talking about in terms of not only that SEL has replaced the SAT, but how do you give your student not just more SEL, but opportunities to refine their social emotional competencies, their learning, the way they interact with others, and the way they feel about themselves. And so it's through this impactor pathway that we're really excited to do this. And for those of you, again, that have been texting along, we're going to go ahead and give you a results email. It'll look something like this. And if you want to take this Impactor Pathway survey, or if you want to refer it to your friends, just go to impactorpathway.com. And at the end, you'll get a results email that will have exactly what your strength is: social awareness, self-management, etc. You'll be able to hear from Grace again, and she'll give you a big congratulations. You can follow up by clicking some of these links to get the data that works throughout this assessment. You'll find more about our coursework and our program. I think Danny will talk a little bit later about kind of next steps and how this works. This email will do this as well. And again, you can forward this email, share it with friends, community members, your school. You also have access to our parent podcast, just a fun little podcast in which we educate parents and talk more adult to adult on some of these really important social emotional learning skills. But I think more than anything, kind of what, if you take anything away from this meeting this Sunday afternoon, and again, we really thank Betty and Hanlon for this time and opportunity, it's that the SAT and ACT are being replaced. It's a fact. And SEL has replaced it. And now the question is, what are we going to do as students, as parents, as those who support learners in our community, to give them the SEL skills and competencies that they need and deserve? And so with that, really like to thank you again for this opportunity. Turn it back over to Danny Byun to kind of talk about next steps with the Impactor Pathway overall.
Thank you, Josh. And as I mentioned, Josh is leading our curriculum development team. But even more than that, my greatest benefit has been the way that Josh has helped me to understand what SEL is and why it's so important. Because as I think about, the way that we talked about SEL before, the way, Harvard refers to it as soft skills. Stanford refers to it as personal qualities. And there are different kind of language. Even in the past, when there is a student that has high SEL before, how did we describe them? We'd say, oh, that girl, she's special. She has it, right? Or he has a very high EQ or good soft skills. And this was some of the language that we used to use to describe students with high SEL. But then when our students have low SEL, if our child is super, super shy and doesn't know how to socialize, like as a parent, what do? We kind of push them towards the other kids and we say, hey, play with the other kids, right? We kind of and then they wouldn't play and we say, why aren't you playing? But we didn't know how to train our kids in social and emotional skills, and we didn't know how to develop their SEL. Now, the great thing is the California Department of Education, the state of California, and really the federal government has created a framework, has adopted a framework to help us understand how to help our children in these ways. And that's really the exciting thing about the Impactor Pathway platform that Dr. Arnold has been really kind of leading and driving. So a little bit more about Impactor Pathway. What is it? That experience that Dr. Arnold just took us through. Every week, students will have one homework assignment that's kind of like that, where there's video, there are questions, there's information. It's a fun and engaging platform for students. But obviously, social and emotional skills cannot be built by yourself in front of a computer, but they need to be practiced. They need to be practiced with our friends. They need to be practiced with adults. And so each week students have a lesson, then each week students come for a live coaching workshop where a flex coach will evaluate the work that they've done and then give them feedback. And then the students will practice and we'll give more feedback. Then we'll practice with our coach and we'll practice with other students, because really students only get better, only develop their SEL, more social emotional skills with practice, practice, practice. And for the guests who have joined us today, lastly, the benefits of the Impactor Pathway, our students will develop effective leadership skills. They'll learn how to collaborate and work in teams. We'll help them to find meaningful community service experiences. We'll teach them to manage their stress, their emotions, and their stress. We will help them set goals. Students will gain confidence, problem solving, relationship skills, communication skills, and really finding your passion. These are the benefits of the Flex Impactor Pathway. And as I jumped ahead a second ago, let's see here. For today's guests, we actually have a special promotion, and we are offering the Flex Impactor Pathway 7-Step Student Leadership Challenge. And so this is a program that is beginning to introduce leadership. Why is leadership important? The how and what of leadership. You know, because before students can become leaders, they must learn about leadership. And again, this is for students who are in 6th through 9th grades. And it will be offered at Flex Fremont, and we'll also have an online option available. The 7-Step Leadership Challenge will begin September 26th, and it will go through November 18th. And this program is normally priced at $895. But today, for Hanlin guests, we are offering a deep discount. And so we're going to offer this class for $495. And all of the registrations that come from Hanlin guests, we will actually make a 20% donation back to Hanlin. And so we want to be able to provide, you know, this is our way of saying thank you to you for spending this Sunday afternoon with us, and to Hanlin for making this opportunity available. And so, but the way for us to know that you were here is either to scan this QR code so that we know you were here. But if you prefer not to actually scan the code, Cindy will also be dropping a seminar survey link inside of the chat. And so if you actually, you know, fill out the survey or scan the QR code, those will be our ways of knowing that you were here today. So even if you're not sure if you would like to take the course, maybe you want a little bit more time to think about it, we totally understand. But please leave some kind of a record for us to know that you were here, so that we can offer those discounts to you and also make those gifts back to the Hanlin Foundation. And so that actually brings our seminar to a close. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Cindy. And Cindy, maybe you can share the Q&A screen, but Cindy will actually be hosting our Q&A. And so with that, Cindy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Danny and Josh, for sharing those insights. Let me post the QR code again. And also with that, I would like to invite everybody to submit their questions in the chat box. I see questions coming through already. So first question from Whitney. It looks like all the public schools have this SEL program. What about private schools? How do UCs evaluate those students from private schools?
Josh, maybe I'll take a stab at this first, and then I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts. Great. Whitney, that's an excellent question. And I think the honest response is we don't know yet. And I say that because these standards, the California Department of Education just adopted and kind of announced these standards 1 year ago. And so during 2020, all of the funding came in, they did research, they adopted the standards, and in 2021, they announced the standards. The UCs obviously eliminated the requirements again just, in 2020 as well, the SAT requirement. So all of these are things that are happening real time right now. And so they're happening, in the moment. But in terms of how, just to make sure I understand the question correctly, the UCs, will evaluate from students. So I'm assuming the question is, if you're in a private high school, how will the UC evaluate students from those environments? I believe that, in order for different types of accreditations for private schools, they need to adopt different types of kind of requirements. For example, Common Core was something that the federal government required and mandated. And then they provided the funding and the budget for the California Department of Education to implement Common Core. But then there were standards, Common Core standards, that private schools were required to also adopt in order to maintain or retain their accreditations. And so, that's a great question, and I don't think we have an answer yet. But Josh, do you have anything to maybe add in addition to what I've shared?
No, I think you did a great job, Danny, and I know that there's more questions and just a few minutes left of the presentation. So I think, if Cindy can get to some of the other questions as well, I think the answer you provided is the reality, is that, some of these we just don't know, but we do know that this is what has replaced the SAT, and we do know that the demonstrated actions and behaviors of students in regards to their leadership, ability to collaborate, and the soft skills we demonstrated in the parent assessment are what's requisite going forward.
Great, thank you, Josh.
Great.
And,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Sandy.
So next question is actually from Betty. She said, my grandson's is 10. Is it okay to take the SEL course?
I think that, first of all, Betty, thank you for asking. I have 4 children. My number 2 just turned 11, and he actually started the Impactor Pathway program when he was 10. And so, he was finishing 5th grade, and he actually began the Impactor Pathway program. My son is an example of a 10-year-old who was able to, but maybe Dr. Arnold, I'll turn it over to you, because maybe there's some academic skills and some rigor, that may or may not be appropriate for 10-year-olds. Dr. Arnold?
I think the content of the courses is absolutely there. I think we just want to make sure that a student's reading level and their reading ability is there. And so schools use an A through Z reading leveler. And so I think that as long as students are at kind of level S or T, which is right about where 4th and 5th graders are, they should be good. But I think struggling readers might have a little bit of a harder time. And I'm talking about elementary readers who have maybe some problem decoding. But other than that, if their reading skills are there, then we think 10-year-olds is right about at the cusp of the maturity that's able to access the course.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we have a final question. So how long is each lesson?
Dr. Arnold, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the lesson format happens like this, as Danny talked about. There are 2 ways that students learn every week. And so every week, students are given online coursework that they can complete asynchronously. So that means on their own. Those are a series of exactly what you saw me take everybody through earlier, a series of questions, videos, readings, and participation in which students will upload answers and learn about themselves through coursework. And then, depending on whether you take the class online or in person, there is a face-to-face component, not only with an expert SEL Flex coach, but also inside of a cohort of similarly aged peers. So if your 8th grader is in a course and they meet on Thursdays, then there'll be coursework every week to complete. And on Thursdays, they'll meet together with their cohort, small group of other learners, as well as with their SEL coach, to talk not only about what they learn, but to then practice those same skills. So if we're doing a collaboration skill that week, students will be able to practice that, a presentation skill. They'll be able to practice that in front of others, get feedback from peers, feedback from our SEL coach. And each lesson we figure to be, for the online components, between about 45 and 60 minutes of coursework a week. And then the in-person component, Danny, if you want to talk about kind of the time length of the in-person.
Sure. And the in-person lessons are designed to be 90 minutes long. And again, in these in-person lessons, the students will be getting feedback on the work that they've done. They'll be reinforcing some of the concepts that they've learned. But then more than anything else, they're going to be practicing, getting feedback and practicing. And so, because again, ultimately we can't develop social or emotional skills without practice. And so, but the live in-person sessions are 90 minutes in length. And so, if I'm not mistaken, Sandy, I think that's our last question. And Betty also gave us a time warning a few minutes ago. And so that will bring our webinar presentation to a close for today. Before we go, again, I would like to encourage all families, please provide us feedback through the Google Doc, which Sandy dropped into the chat box. Just let us know whether this information was helpful or not, because we know that Bay Area, Silicon Valley families are very busy. And so we want to be respectful of your time. And so we want to, really ask your feedback to let us know, was this information helpful? If so, how? Or are there other topics that we also could have, offered or provided to make it more helpful? And that survey will also leave us a record to know that you were here today, so we can honor the promotion that we're offering. Or again, if you're too busy to fill out the survey, please do scan the QR code. And again, that will be our record to know that you were here. But again, on behalf of the Flex team, I'd like to thank you for taking time with us today. And Betty, maybe I'll turn it back over to you for a final closing.
Sure. On behalf of the翰林Educational Foundation, I really appreciate Daniel and Dr. Joshua and Sandy can give us the valuable presentation. I really enjoy it. So I highly recommend all the parents, please fill up the feedback form. I already complete. So I really believe the best investment is yourself. So for me, the best investment is for our next generation. So I really appreciate Joshua, Dr. Joshua, and Daniel, and Sandy, and all the parents, and all my翰林volunteers today. And we're looking forward the future presentation for翰林Educational Foundation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You have a great day. Thank you. Bye.